the blood and soil is what makes for your American identity, your genetic lineage. And I just reject that view. I think it's anti-American. I think what makes for an American identity is your allegiance, your unabiding allegiance to the founding ideals of this country, and your willingness to pledge allegiance to those ideals.
Oh boy, we got a bit of a controversial one today. As you can see, we have Vivek Ramaswamy. He's on the, I was going to say Lex Luthor podcast, the Lex Fridman podcast. And he's talking about a talk he had with Ann Coulter a while ago, where she basically said she wouldn't vote for him because, yeah, he's American, he's got an American passport and all that, American nationality, but he's not properly American. He's not American enough to vote for as president. And I think it was quite controversial at the time. I've definitely got my views on this. It's a bit complicated in the case of America, but first of all, let's get into the video before I start dropping my controversial views on you and and seeing what you think of them.
Just to linger a little bit on the demonization and to bring Ann Coulter into the picture, which I recommend people should listen to your conversation with her. I haven't listened to her much, but she had this thing where she clearly admires and respects you as a human being, and she's basically saying you're one of the good ones. And this idea that you had this brilliant question of like, what does it mean to be an American? Mm-hmm. And she basically said, not you, Vivek. But she said, well, maybe you, but not people like you. So that whole kind of approach to immigration, I think, is really anti-meritocratic.
And maybe even anti-American.
Anti-American, yeah.
Anti-meritocratic and anti-American. Well, this opens up a big can of worms, doesn't it? What is the American identity? And I've talked about this on other videos. Now, America. What is America? Well, America is the United States of America. It is a country that was founded, in 1776 after a long war of independence fought by the colonists against Great Britain, the preeminent empire at that time. And the colonists, who were they? Well, they were, for the most part, Brits, with a few, I guess there's some Dutch thrown in there, maybe some Germans at the time, I don't know, but primarily Brits, yeah. Englishmen, for the most part. And they were the ones that founded the United States of America. They founded it for themselves, and they founded it for their descendants. They specifically said that. Now, of course, there were others in the area of the United States at the time. Obviously, there were the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples, the various tribes or nations. Okay, so what does nation mean? Nation. Notice how, like, the Indian tribes, they call themselves nations. Cherokee Nation, Lakota Nation, etc. What does nation mean? The original meaning of nation is an ethnic group with a shared cultural heritage and background. Not just a shared ethnicity, but shared culture and heritage, and typically a language and religion and all that. That's what a nation is. Yeah. People of a shared ethnic heritage. So when we talk about nation states, like the European nation states, the state is a country, a political entity, and the nation part is the people in it. And, these European nation states were each one was primarily made up of people of a certain ethnic background or backgrounds. That's the idea behind the nation state. So the nation state, the original nation state of the United States, or the original nation of the United States of America, was these Brits and their descendants, looking forward. They're the true Americans in that sense. Now, of course, there were Native Americans, there were the Africans, the slaves brought over as part of the transatlantic slave trade, who were there already, and they kept coming. So, if you're going to create a country, well, the people there, if you don't want them there, you better get rid of them right away. And apparently there was some debate about that, sending Africans back. This is later, though, around the Civil War, of course. But in the end, they didn't do that. So they and their descendants also have a right to this country. But America, the United States of America, was primarily not just European, but Northern European for decades and decades and decades, with a few exceptions. There was some mass migration by Chinese who were brought over for cheap labor, build the railroad and all that. So there was some of that, and then there was a law was passed to bar Chinese immigration at a certain point because the people felt there were too many of them. And then the gates were open to Southern Europeans. And I think I said in another video, my father once told me that I think his parents used to moan about the Southern European scum that were coming in. This was probably, this would have been back in the 30s or the 40s, I guess. So even Southern Europeans were looked down upon by the Northern Europeans, who were the true Americans, so to speak. And of course, so there are various waves of immigration, primarily from Europe, until 1965. And what happened in 1965? The Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 was passed, which completely upset that balance. Until then, the United States had been like 90% European, with a significant majority made up of blacks, descendants of the slaves, and some Native Americans and a few others, the Chinese and who were already there, that sort of thing. But primarily like 90% European. And the 1965 Immigration Naturalization Act was specifically created to destroy that demographic, what's the word I'm looking for? The percentages, the demographic makeup of the United States. It was especially that was the goal of Emanuel Seller, one of the guys who promoted that act, one of the sponsors of that act. It's also called the Hart-Celler Act, Emanuel Seller. Look him up and check out his early life, as they say. So now we're 60 odd years on from that, or about 60 years later from the Immigration and Naturalization Act 1965, and the United States, the demographics of the United States looks completely different. And completely predictably, it is causing problems. And now you come to issues like this, where Ann Coulter says, well, Vivek Ramaswamy, you're not really American.
So I want to confront this directly because it is a popular current on the American right. The reason I'm not picking on Ann Coulter specifically is I think actually it's a much more widely shared view, and I just give her at least credit for willing to articulate it, a view that the blood and soil is what makes for your American identity, your genetic lineage. And
Well, it's certainly a big part of it. United States, European countries didn't just arise because the people living there, well, hold on, let me put this right way. European countries, nothing like a European country arose in Africa, for example, except in South Africa, which was created, much like the United States, by Europeans. Yeah? Same in Australia, same in New Zealand. Okay? Where Europeans go, certain Europeans go, they create European-style societies. Africans and Asians and whoever else, Indians or whatever, they create societies too, but they're not like European societies.
just reject that view. I think it's anti-American. I think what makes for an American identity is your allegiance, your unabiding allegiance to the founding ideals of this country, and your willingness to pledge allegiance to those ideals.
See, that's what they call a civic nationalist. It doesn't matter who you are. If you can stroll across the border, you can be a Guatemalan who's, on one of these migrant caravans, but you just set foot in the United States and suddenly, the magic dirt of the United States makes you into an American, or it soon will, but will it? Will it? Guatemala and, Honduras and India and, Uganda and whatever, all these other countries, they're the way they are because of the people.
So those are two different views. I think that there is a view on the American right now that says that we're not a creedal nation, that our nation's not about a creed, it's about a physical place and a physical homeland.
Yeah, yes, it is about a creed, and it is about a place, and it is about the people. by the people, the United States that everybody wants to come to is the one that was created by certain Europeans at a certain time, and which worked for a long time until it was started being dismantled.
I think that view fails on several accounts. Obviously, we're a nation. Every nation has to have a geographic space that it defines its own. So obviously, we are, among other things, a geographic space. But the essence of the United States of America, I think, is the common creed, the ideals that hold that common nation together. Without that, a few things happen. First of all, American exceptionalism becomes impossible, and I'll tell you why. Every other nation is also built on the same idea. Most nations have been built on common blood and soil arguments, genetic stock of, Italy or Japan would have a stronger national identity than the United States in that case because they have a much longer standing claim on what their genetic lineage really was. The ethnicity of the people is far more pure in those contexts than in the United States. So that's the first reason. American exceptionalism becomes impossible. The second is there's all kinds of contradictions that then start to emerge. If your claim on American identity is defined based on how long you've been here, well, then the Native Americans would have a far greater claim of being American than somebody who came here on the Mayflower or somebody who came here afterward.
No. See, this is... The Native Americans, yes, of course, they lived in the area now inhabited by the United States of America, obviously for centuries, God knows how long, or thousands of years. But that's not what America is. The United States of America was created by, as I said earlier, a certain group of Europeans for themselves. Now, that's just the way it is, yeah? Now, whether they chose to allow, or, so to speak, the Native American tribes to live in their space, which was now their space. I mean, at the end of the day, it was conquest. That's the way the world works. That's what people do. They conquer each other, including Native Americans, by the way. Plenty of them conquered each other. So, no, they don't have a claim on the United States of America. The United States of America allowed them to be part of the United States of America. Whether you think was fair or not, that their land was taken by conquest, is beside the point. It was. It's done.
Now, maybe that blood and soil view is, no, it's not quite the Native Americans. You only have to start at this point and end at this point. So on this view of blood and soil identity, it has to be, okay, you couldn't have come before a certain year, then it doesn't count. But if you came after a certain year, it doesn't count either. That just becomes highly uncompelling as a view of what American national identity actually is, versus my view that American national identity is grounded on whether or not you pledge allegiance to the ideals codified in the Declaration of Independence and actualized in the U.S. Constitution. And, it's been said, some of my friends on the right have said things like, people will not die for a set of ideals. People won't fight for abstractions or abstract ideals. I actually disagree with that. The American Revolution basically disproves that. The American Revolution was fought for anything over abstract ideals.
Yeah, it was, but it was fought by a more or less homogeneous group of men to create their own place for them and their people and their descendants. It wasn't just a ragtag bunch of people from around the world of all different ethnic groups who came together and said, oh, let's come together on the basis of this ideal. It emerged organically over decades.
That said that, we believe in self-governance and free speech and free exercise of religion. That's what we believe in the United States, which was different from Old World England. So I do think that there is this brewing debate on the right. And do I disagree like hell with Ann Coulter on this? Absolutely. And did I take serious issue with some of the things she told me? Absolutely. But I also believe that she had the stones to say, if I may say it that way, the things that many on the right believe, but haven't quite articulated in the way that she has. And I think we need to have that debate in the open. Now, personally, I think most of the conservative movement actually is with me on this. But I think it's become a very popular counter-narrative in the other direction to say that, your vision of American identity is far more physical in nature. And to me, I think it is still ideals-based in nature. And I think that that's a good debate for the future for us to have in the conservative movement. And I think it's going to be a defining feature of, what direction the conservative movement goes in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is an important debate. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think when Trump takes office that he should he's going to have to send Vivek Ramaswamy back to India? Ooh, that would be controversial. And I don't dislike the guy. He's obviously intelligent. He's well spoken. I think I don't know. I don't know if I trust him or not. I don't know enough about him, but he comes across well. And he says all the right things that conservatives like generally, especially today's conservatives, who I'm not very impressed with. I haven't been impressed with conservatives for a long time now, because they haven't conserved a damn thing. They can't even conserve the ladies' room, can they? So I don't know. The jury's out. But let me know what you think about all this in the comments. Hope I didn't offend anybody too much, but I'm sure you'll let me know. In the meantime, like and subscribe really helps me grow the channel and continue making content for you.